Like a lot of these guys that were into cuck ones I worked with, like after they watched the porn or after a couple did experiment with role plays of like them acting like a different guy when they were having sex with their partner, they felt
Mm-hmm.
horrible after. I had
Mm-hmm.
one man, for example, okay. He wanted to role play with his girlfriend about this. And he said, he basically the role play was that like he would leave right
Mm-hmm.
out of town for a weekend, and some mechanic would come over to fix her sink or something.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Oh, I have a boyfriend," and she was saying his name, right? Like my boyfriend, my boyfriend Derek or whatever. He's not home right now. And then she basically gave in. And what happened? I swear to God, he said that when they were going into it, he was shaking like
Uh-huh.
this, and he was saying it was cold, and it wasn't cold at all, and his body was having a traumatic response.
Mm.
And so for him personally, like exploring down this route, even with a woman he felt safe with, his girlfriend, like the thought of her cheating on him with another man gave him a traumatic response.
Mm-hmm.
So you can try it out, like to each their own. But all I'm saying is like, ask yourself how you feel after it's done, or you explore
Mm-hmm.
that idea. Like if you feel good about it, great. But if you all of a sudden start to think that now she's going to go do it with other people behind your back,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably not a good idea to, you might want to look
Mm-hmm.
inward and try to heal where that's coming from.
Mm. Now, have you heard of this concept where it's not like traditional cuckolding, but it's like watching your partner have sex with someone else while like you direct them?
Okay, so there's even more control over the trauma that goes
So
along with
like
things.
you say, okay, now you put your cock in her pussy, or like,
Mhm.
okay, now lick her right nipple. Like the cock is directing the scenario. What do you think about that?
Before I answer that question, have you interviewed someone who's into cuckolding on your show, like
Yeah.
personally? Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'd love to talk to them. Anyways, no,
I love a full
yeah,
spectrum
I
of
love
things,
I love
right?
that you like
Yeah,
you're
it's
trying
so
to get like
fun.
a brushstroke of every perspective on
Yeah.
this thing. Yeah, absolutely. That just kind of like really validates my original opinion, right, about the whole catharsis thing. Like if they have trauma, it's like they're even wanting more control over the trauma, right? Like that
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
you're saying like from the trauma of like something you couldn't control and maybe someone
Mhm.
hurt you or abused you, and then now like practicing this. So okay, so what if it's healing? Are you saying like there are other ways to heal yourself?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I haven't personally found someone that like yes, like doing cuckolding with this person I love and trust and having control over it has been healing. There's like a perverse satisfaction because you're like it's like this almost like this
Yeah. Like a
monster.
gratification almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the ego is saying, I know that she's going to eventually do this anyways because you're afraid that the trauma is going to occur again. Because when trauma happens to us, we act and believe in a way that it's going to happen
Mhm.
again. So it makes us feel safe, right? Like
Mhm.
I was cheated on actually in one of my
Mhm.
first relationships,
Mhm.
right? And so my next relationship, I purposely did things subconsciously, right,
Mhm.
to push her away,
Mm.
right? And I think we naturally do this as human beings, right? We just recreate this trauma. And so like when it comes to someone doing that, there might be like this perverse satisfaction, but at the end of the day, I don't
Mhm.
think it's coming from a necessarily healthy place, mentally healthy place. And
Mhm.
like my philosophy is that as human beings, we are supposed to learn and grow and heal
Mhm.
so we can heal others. And I just don't think that's aiding that
Mhm.
process.
Interesting. I'm definitely a fan of learning and growing as well. I was in both positions where like I was cheated on before, and then I also cheated on someone before, and I definitely know that it's not a good feeling. It's very dark, it's very hurtful.
Of
Um I have another question. So,
course.
how long have you been married?
Oh, I'm not married yet. I've been with my girlfriend for about 10 months.
Okay. Would you say that after, so there's like research that shows there's sexual humps, like humps of sexual desire for each other because it just becomes boring. Um,
Hmm.
there's 5-year hump and 10-year hump
Mhm.
that research found like people tend to struggle in
Yeah,
terms of
sure.
passion for each other.
Yeah.
Then my next question would be, let's say if the couple's like, well, we've been hearing about holding, we've seen maybe a video, like a porn video, and we feel like we want to try. What are other practices that people can attempt instead of exploring cuddling if you feel like cuddling comes from an unhealthy place?
Esther Perel talks about this a lot, right? with
The
couples for
pulling
sure.
and pushing and the energy.
Yeah, and also
Yeah.
like the sense of like, okay, you have to just ask yourself like, what emotional need is being met through that act, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, maybe novelty. Let's just say it's novelty, just for the case of this
Mhm.
argument. If it's novelty, that's some need getting met. Is like, can you have novelty in a different domain, or it can still be in the sexual domain if you want, but can you introduce novelty in another way,
Mhm.
right? That doesn't involve another partner.
Mhm.
Again, I'm always about like, you know, doing whatever you feel is best for you guys, but
Uh-huh.
as a couple, anyone listening, but at the same time, ask what need is being met, and then ask yourself if you can get that need met in a more healthy way, right?
Mhm.
As an example, like you can kind of get out of your mind a lot by drinking a bunch of alcohol, or you can
Uh-huh.
meditate. Both get you
Uh-huh.
out of your mind, but one has really detrimental effects, right? And right, another one is more
Mhm.
positive for you. So it's like when it comes to this need being met, can you get it met in a more healthy way?
Interesting. Okay, now, what would be like? Let's say, what would you recommend specifically if someone was like, okay, like I want novelty. Let's say, what are like three things that you would say? Okay, try these three things first.
Yeah. Go somewhere else in the world.
Travel.
Right.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so
Like
let's
if
say they travel and they're like, we still have this edge of like we're not super. The spark isn't
Mhm.
there. What's
Mhm.
next?
There is a plethora of role plays you can do, right, that don't involve
Mm-hmm.
other people, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's sex toys you can introduce, and I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if they've done all of that, again,
Mm-hmm.
like by all means, kind of tease the idea up a little bit, like try the role play
Uh-huh.
like that my that my client did, where he started to have the trauma response. Like try it out there, like play it out, where it's like you're a different person, she's a different person. How does that feel? If it
Mhm.
feels good for the both of you, you guys kind of check in afterwards. It's like, all right, let's just now hang out with someone else, and we don't have to take it all the way to sex. We can just talk about it with someone else, then kind of check in
Mhm.
with each other. It's like you don't have to just
Mhm.
jump into the deep end all right
Yeah.
away, right? Because you might sink, and then the relationship's gonna fall. And then there's this, like I've had couples who've done this, right in session, and like they're breaking up, like marriages, because they
Uh-huh.
introduced a third person, right?
Uh-huh.
And then an emotional relationship was created with that third person, even though they said they had boundaries around it, because they just jumped in, right? They didn't
Mhm.
explore it slowly. And so
Mm.
I'm saying if you're going to do it, go for it, but just take it one step at a time, like because it can
Mhm.
jeopardize the whole entire relationship. Where if a
Mhm.
betrayal happens, that can cause damage on the whole relationship, and then it's all
Mhm.
gone because you wanted to explore this ephemeral need.
Mhm. Mhm. I mean, that's a good point. It is, one step at a time. I'm definitely a fan of that, and I think it's definitely a mistake when people just, like, randomly and haphazardly have, like, a threesome. And I'm like, well, if it turns out well for you and you had fun and you don't get attached to this other person, great. But what if it does go the other way because you did it haphazardly and now your relationship that you've built like this trust and love for the last like 5 years is now in jeopardy because of that one drunken haphazard night. So I definitely feel you on that. Um, Now, my last question would be if you were to, you know, okay, let me go back. Let's say I'm 30 years old and I'm a 30-year-old man and I'm here talking to you about all kinds of like kinky things that I'm into. Um and that my girlfriend is like, oh, absolutely not. Like, my girlfriend is like super vanilla. What would be your advice for this 30-year-old man? Brian, I'm Brian.
Brian, you should have checked that in the beginning, man. It's your fault.
Okay,
I'm,
expand on that.
I was being sarcastic. I mean,
Oh.
because I didn't want to make him feel bad. I mean, for a guy who is men who are single, it's like, yeah, you gotta like put those not boundaries up. I guess call them boundaries, right? But you got to say
Mhm.
what you want early on in the relationship.
Mhm.
And I've seen it so many times, unfortunately, with so many married guys who are in their 50s, and it's like they are like sex with their wife is like not. And I was like, it's never been that way. She's like, no, she's always been like, it's just never been compatible. I'm like, how did you have 3 kids with this woman and like spend 20 years with her? I I get that it does happen. And so I would tell Brian, I'd be like, well, Brian, do you think it's a skill deficit or a motivational deficit with her? Is it because
Mm.
she can't do it or she doesn't want to do it?
Mhm.
Because I believe people can change their behavior,
Mhm.
right? It's like, is are you kind of like thinking it's just who she is, so you kind of give up? Because a lot of
Mhm.
men, the way they try to change women is they use a kind of a masculine approach, and they're like, they challenge her, right? Instead of like supporting her and appreciating her and say like, I love that you do this. Oh my God, you're so sexy when you moan, or when you like that time, and then you like said that different voice. It's like, oh, that turned me on. Like, they don't
positive
reinforce
reinforcement. Yeah.
Man, we like to challenge. We like to make each other change by challenge, and we use that same framework with women, and it just makes women feel like that. Like, if you want to get a girl to go to the gym, tell her that she looks sexy when she's sweating, right? And it's like, instead of like, oh, you got a little bit of like a little fat going on over there, and she's like, fuck you, like, right?
Yeah.
So I would tell
that's
Brian,
a really good point. I never thought about that. How men challenge each other, and it's okay, but in a relationship, that's very negative.
For a woman, yeah, exactly, yeah. So I would say, like, what's your strategy to trying to get her to do this? And I kind of analyze that with him. Like, what have you tried so far? And I guarantee most men don't know how to like help their wife. Okay, look, relationships are simultaneously the easiest and hardest things in the world, because they're so easy, because it's all about just like meeting their needs and they're meeting your needs. The difficulty comes up with like all the emotions and not people understanding themselves and how to like directly express their needs, fear of rejection, all those things involved. So it's like, I would ask Brian, like, what have you tried so far? And have you been direct? Have you been honest? Have you tried reinforcing her? So I think the strategy is probably off. I think people are capable of, changing, right?
Yeah, I think so too.
Thanks for listening. This was Love Bites. Love Bites by Dr. Tara. Follow Dr. Tara on social media at lovebites.co. Have an orgasmic day.